Don Sweeney is staying on as GM without a contract extension. The Bruins are officially searching for a new head coach. And after that end of the season press conference, it's pretty clear the vibes in Boston are way off.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins your first listen every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Now, I am your host, Ian McLaren, as I said, and I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. I've been hosting this podcast since 2019, covering the Boston Bruins for about 20 years for various outlets, and was a full-time hockey news writer for thescore.com. On today's episode, we are going to discuss some takeaways from this morning's end-of-the-year press conference featuring Charlie Jacobs, Cam Neely, and Don Sweeney, team CEO, president, and general manager, respectively. This might be a two-parter, to be honest, because there were some specific quotes I think we need to dig into more in detail. Maybe we'll do that tomorrow. Top 5 quotes to take away from that. Today, I just wanted to kind of lay out the land, how things are seeming in Boston in the front office after what was a pretty disappointing season pretty much from day one. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. You can find me at Ian C. McLaren. Please do hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast app if you have not already. And also the like button and the bell notification on YouTube so that each new episode is automatically pinged on your phone. So, as I mentioned, Cam Neely, Charlie Jacobs, Don Sweeney met with the media in Boston here on Wednesday morning. And just overall, it was a very tense seeming atmosphere. Bruins brass openly admitting that it was an embarrassing season, a disappointing season, that accountability is the name of the game, but then also getting kind of dismissive about certain questions that were asked about their track records, drafting specifically, and also about their job security. Like, yeah, obviously these guys are going to be back, meaning Neely and Sweeney. However, one of the most newsworthy bits from the press conference was the fact that Don Sweeney, general manager, has 1 year remaining on his contract entering the offseason. And Cam Neely told reporters that he's still contemplating what the best course of action is. He added he feels like Don has done a good job in Boston for the most part. And Sweeney added the lack of security won't impact his decisions as the Bruins GM. Now, here's the thing. Sweeney was already given the green light to go ahead with a lot of the heavy lifting in order to retool this team and to bring them back to the postseason. He was given the green light to go ahead and sell some more prior to the trade deadline. And he's being tasked, as we'll discuss here in a moment, with finding the next head coach for the Boston Bruins, something that he's already done twice during his tenure, which now spans 10 years. Don't forget the Bruins hired him in 2015 as the general manager right before that somewhat disastrous NHL entry draft that is still talked about to this day. And while they did miss the playoffs in the first couple seasons under Sweeney, they had made it 8 straight years. They went to the Stanley Cup final in 2019, game 7 of the Stanley Cup final, in fact. And Sweeney also architected the team that was the best regular season team in NHL history just a couple of years ago. So on one hand, you can kind of see what they're saying in terms of, yes, Sweeney, Neely will be back. Jacobs mentioned some data-driven metrics to support the decision. And really, when you look back at the regular season performance for the Boston Bruins since 2015, 2016, all the way up to this past regular season, the Bruins are indeed one of the top teams in the NHL. In fact, they are level with the Tampa Bay Lightning for the top point percentage and the most amount of points accumulated by any NHL team since the beginning of 2015-16. A record of 458, 233, and 91, 1,007 points, 644 point percentage, which is equal with the Tampa Bay Lightning. The playoffs, since Don Sweeney took over, a bit of a different story. They do have 93 games, which is fourth highest, which tells us, yeah, they've made the playoffs. They've gone far, but a record of 45-48 for a 484 point percentage, and of course, 0 Stanley Cups in that time. Now, 2019, you can kind of chalk it up to, yeah, Sweeney kind of lucked into that final appearance. He inherited Patrice Bergeron, David Krejci, Tuukka Rask, Zdeno Chara, Brad Marchand, and others. 2023 was more of his imprint. Yeah, those core guys, were 3 of them at least, were still there. And he went above and beyond to make sure that team was well stocked for the playoffs. The Game 7 loss to St. Louis, you play that 100 times. Bruins probably win more often than not. You replay that series against the Panthers, one bounce either way could have made the difference. So you can't necessarily fault him for that, but you can, of course, question a lot of things over the course of his tenure, including the draft record, some questionable free agent signings. I've always said, everydayers will remember, that I'm a big fan of Don Sweeney's trades. I think he excels in that area. And again, you go back to 2015 NHL entry draft, the Bruins have the 6th overall pick from that draft on the roster, and he's a key member of the team. He was able to get Pavel Zacha for Erik Haula. That is a very nice piece of work. Even the trades he made at the deadline, getting some good assets for some aging players, good work. You can go back, look at Hampus Lindholm trade, Charlie Coyle trade, etc. Signings, not as strong. Drafting, yeah, there's some big question marks, but there's also some pretty good hits, including Charlie McAvoy and Jeremy Swayman, who are 2 of your 3 core players. All this to say, the biggest takeaway for me from this press conference is the fact that Don Sweeney has a vote of confidence to try to turn things around here. But it does not come with much in the way of security, right? They're not announcing a contract extension for Don Sweeney. They're saying, you've been tasked with keeping this team at the highest of competitive levels. They took a big step back this season after he made some key free agent signings last summer. He's going to get a 3rd opportunity to hire a head coach, which general managers rarely do. 10 years of tenure rarely happens either. Going to get a chance to draft, hopefully a top 5 pick. Going to have a boatload of money to use this summer on key free agents. If you're not able to hit on, let's be honest, all of those key areas, and if the team stumbles out of the gate next season, or we're in the same position next year on the outside looking in of the playoffs, or an easy out in the first round, then buddy, you're not going to be extended and you're going to be let go. That's kind of the message that I got today. Yes, Jacobs and Neely and Sweeney are all safe, and you can debate whether or not that is warranted or merited. We'll talk more about Cam Neely's kind of abrasive tone and defensive posture during the press conference, not to mention Don Sweeney's. But at the end of the day, Charlie Jacobs makes the decisions. He signs the checks. Cam Neely is team president and has final say on the hockey operations decisions. And Don Sweeney is the least secure among that group, not necessarily tied to one another, but Neely at some point could easily say, "You're gone. Let's bring in a new general manager." As long as the team's making money, you would expect Cam Neely will be safe. If they're losing, Don Sweeney will be the first to go. So there's a lot riding on this offseason without that extension in place for Don Sweeney. One of the first things he's going to have to do is find a new head coach, and we'll touch on that aspect of the presser here as the podcast continues. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your day. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And while Don Sweeney was non-committal to extending general manager Don Sweeney, he did say that Sweeney will be tasked with getting a new head coach behind the bench. And management has indeed started a coaching search. Interim head coach Joe Sacco, I guess you can effectively take that tag off. He's now in a pool of candidates that will be considered. Don Sweeney said Sacco earned and deserved that. He finished the season with the record of 25, 30, and 7 after Jim Montgomery was fired in November. Sweeney said he wouldn't rule out a candidate without NHL head coaching experience, but said the person must have some exposure to the NHL. So everydayers will remember I discussed some candidates the other day. One of those was David Carl from the University of Denver, accomplished at the NCAA and World Junior levels, but does not have that exposure to the NHL, whereas a guy like Jay Pandolfo at BU certainly does. Marco Sturm does as a former assistant. Mark Savard as the current assistant in Toronto. And, of course, some retreads like a John Tortorella, Peter Laviolette, maybe Mike Sullivan if he becomes available. David Quinn's name has been thrown out there. Sweeney said he's prioritizing someone who can communicate with players because that is paramount these days. Structure, details, and being organized is also paramount. Sacco has been with the Bruins for quite some time before Sweeney's time, actually. He's been an assistant, an associate since the 2013-14 season. Previously coached the Avs for 4 seasons. It's been a pretty precipitous drop for the Bruins, and that's where some of the bad vibes and the frustration comes from. We'll touch on that here later on. But it's clearly not just a coaching issue with respect to why the Bruins have indeed plummeted. You had Patrice Bergeron, David Krejci retiring. You have Jake DeBrusk, Danton Heinen, James Van Riemsdyk leaving in free agency. Inability to re-sign some of those guys that were acquired a couple years ago, like a Taylor Hall or a Nick Foligno or Tyler Bertuzzi, not re-signed in the case of the former two guys, but kind of shipped off as cap victims. You had Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov, who signed big deals last summer that got off to rough starts. Trading Linus Ullmark, who, let's be honest, has not been very good for the Ottawa Senators in the playoffs so far against Toronto. Jeremy Swayman missing training camp before signing an 8-year deal and his numbers dropping. Hampus Lindholm, Charlie McAvoy were injured, and then, of course, being big-time sellers at the trade deadline. And Charlie Jacobs said they owe fans a better team, and they aim to deliver a better team. They embrace the criticism because it's well-deserved, but he did say Neely and Sweeney are the right people to turn things around, and that while not everything has gone right, Don has been a great GM in this league, according to Neely. Everything hasn't gone right. It doesn't. That's just sports. But there's been more good than bad. If that's your criteria, then that's fine. The Bruins will be looking to prioritize scoring in the offseason, but the head coach search will be the first thing. You can't really plan much outside of that without knowing who you're going to bring in as a coach, what his system's going to be, what kind of buttons he'll push. They have spoken at length with Joe Sacco. He's aware that they're going to have a coaching search. He's also aware that he'll be part of the final group of coaches that they get down to because he's earned that and deserved that. He kind of had a interview on the fly here this season. They want a coach that's going to evolve a little bit offensively, communicate with young players and their stubbornness or inexperience, he said. And again, they're going to look for somebody who has some NHL exposure. Having said that, if someone blows them away, he said, it's not going to be necessarily a deal breaker that they don't have that NHL exposure, but the criteria that they have in place is set, and they'll go through it similar to last time when they did hire Jim Montgomery after possibly prematurely firing Bruce Cassidy. So there'll be internal candidates like a Jay Leach, Ryan Muganel, external candidates, perhaps like a Laviolette, Quinn, maybe Greg Cronin, who was let go by the Anaheim Ducks recently, Mike Sullivan if he becomes available. Why has Sweeney been given so many opportunities to find the right bench boss? Well, he's found a couple good ones in Cassidy and Montgomery. You could argue that Cassidy maybe could have gotten more out of that 2023 playoff team. Maybe Montgomery kind of had his one foot out the door, wanted to go to St. Louis. Jacobs said the shelf life of a head coach is significantly shorter than one of the GM or team president. You only have players' attention for a select window of time, and then sometimes you lose it. It's Don's job to make sure he's got his hand on the pulse of whether or not the players tune the coach out, and he's done a pretty good job of measuring that. Now, having said that, there's obviously real questions about the structure of the roster, the depth of the roster, the depth of the pipeline. And there were some testy moments at this press conference, some moments of defensiveness. And we'll touch on how the vibes were a bit off or kind of way off here as the podcast continues. If you're looking for a snack that is both nutritious and delicious, then look no further than Wonderful Pistachios, where you can crack into a good source of protein. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you, unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in shell options are also a classic favorite. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Now, with each passing year, I'm realizing that the things that I loved about Cam Neely as a player don't really translate to his role as team president. He obviously was tough as nails, did not back down from a fight, aggressive, and willing to win at all costs. Now, the latter is something that obviously we value, but the other stuff, it can kind of rub people the wrong way. And he got really testy during this press conference, kind of fuming almost. A lot of it came back to being asked about the 2015 NHL entry draft, which, let's be honest, is a bit played out at this point. He's already addressed like kind of what went wrong there and how they were looking to trade up with the Hurricanes, how they kind of fumbled those picks. I think we've already been over that. And while he does have some argument as to why he's keeping Sweeney on, and I mentioned earlier they have the best regular season record over the past decade and have not, like, if Cam Neely and Don Sweeney, if the Bruins had won in 2019, if that game 7 had gone their way, and if 2023 had worked out, then we wouldn't really be having these conversations. There would obviously be more grace shown towards them if this team had won. Were they the reason they didn't win in 2019? Well, not necessarily, because quite frankly, it was kind of an unexpected run to begin with Tampa Bay being kind of in Boston's position a couple years ago, tanking in the first round to the Columbus Blue Jackets. That really opened the door for the Bruins to go further than expected. And the loss, you could kind of pin on Cassidy. I've talked about David Backes not getting in the lineup. Bad first period. Jordan Binnington playing out of his head. Like, again, if you play that game multiple times, chances are the Bruins would win. 2023, that was really, and the players have said this, like, they fumbled that opportunity, and the Bruins went all in and then some in order to make that happen, trading futures and more futures to add, Tyler Bertuzzi into the mix, and that hurt them even last year. First round picks, they're still missing a pick this year, their second round pick. It takes two to tango, and management can put the team in the best position to succeed, while the players can fail as well. And I think, sure, maybe these guys are frustrated because there is an inordinate amount of pressure placed on them to win, whereas the players maybe get more of a pass if they do lose. But at the same time, again, not everything has gone right. There's been more good than bad, and he's earned the right, Sweeney has, to get them back to where he wants, or to where they want the team to be. They didn't really have, like, I think this is part of the problem that rubbed people the wrong way. They didn't really have like a humble approach to their failures. There was always seemed to be an excuse as to why things didn't go the way they wanted to. right? And you can go back to 2015. Like, sure, maybe they overthought it or they were trying to work at a trade. But at the end of the day, you didn't take the best available players per se, right? And while not every team hits on every draft pick, and the Bruins do have some hits at the draft, including Swayman, McAvoy, there is a bit of a disconnect between how the Bruins think they fare the draft and how fans and the wider NHL world views him. Sweeney was Neely was very short in his answers. I mean, we haven't had a lot of first round picks. The picks they have they developed? Well, obviously, you want to hit on all your picks. The scouts do a lot of the work. Here's what we should have done. It's easy to look in hindsight, blah, blah, blah. The narrative, he said, that we're not hitting on all our draft picks. No one is. You pick in the top 10, you better hit. We haven't done that in quite some time. Have we been perfect? No. Can we be better? Yes. Last time the Bruins were inside the top 10, they took Zach Hamill at number 7. That did not hit by any stretch. You can find good players outside the top 10 for sure. They picked Fabian Lysell. Maybe you should have gone with Wyatt Johnson, Robert Thomas in 2017. 2015, obviously, so much is made of leaving Barzal, Connor, Shabbat on the table. You could argue they would have won the cup in 2019, 2023, but who knows? Who knows what the dominoes would have been? Like, you can't just look 10 years back and say, you picked these 3 players, this, and this all would have happened. Maybe they don't draft this guy as well. Maybe this trade doesn't happen, blah, blah, blah. Who knows? Like, hindsight is indeed 2020, but the reality is the draft record isn't as good, I think, as they seem to make it out to be. Their track records as executives, is it as good as they make it out to be? No. Is it as bad as we, the fans, might think it is? Probably not either. It is a precipitous drop from 2023 to here in 2025. The Bruins have 0 cups to show for it. People don't want to hear it, but the regular season success is measurable. Playoffs, much more of a crapshoot. They've had 2 really good chances at it. Blew it in 2019. You have a home game in a game 7 with the cup on the line. I mean, the Bruins know what it means to lose that kind of a game because of 2011. They should have been more ready for that one. 2023, Jim Montgomery making some blunders, trying to do too much. You can blame that on management, though, for getting rid of him too soon. Like, it's not black and white by any stretch of the imagination. Have Sweeney and Neely done enough to be able to see this retool through? Sure. Are they very vulnerable to losing their jobs if this doesn't turn around quickly? Also sure. Like, both of those things can be true at the same time. And I think that's where we find ourselves at this particular moment. Again, I'm going to go through the transcript from today's presser, pull out some of the best quotes, and we can talk about that on tomorrow's podcast. So this conversation is not done. I would love to hear what you all think of today's press conference. Please hit me up in the comments on YouTube or on social media as well. And thank you for bearing with me in this later than usual publishing, but I wanted to see what happened this morning and get all the latest here on the Boston Bruins, because that's what we do on the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. For your next listen, check out Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please do take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.